Hi everybody, my name is Drake Pledger and you're watching Flintlock Operator. Today we're going to be covering a very important topic, and that is maintenance on your flintlock. Flintlocks require a great deal of maintenance and care to function properly. And most people's woes and notions that these are unreliable stem from really 2 points. One is that they have a poorly made gun to begin with and the lock isn't constructed well and it doesn't spark very well. Or number 2, they don't know how to properly maintain and take care of their flintlock. And what makes the problem worse is that many 21st century modern firearms can be fired for thousands of times with very little or no care to clean or maintain them. So we have this false expectation that these old guns can to a certain degree mimic that amount of modern reliability, where that's just not the case. Flintlocks and cap locks require a great deal of maintenance and care to function properly, but especially the flintlock, since the ignition is on the exterior of the gun rather than being encapsulated in some sort of chamber. Now, the topic of flintlock maintenance is pretty big. There's a lot of people who have their own ways of doing it. Some people can get very detailed and scientific, and some people just swab and go. We're going to be working from a perspective, what I like to call on the run flintlock maintenance. So we're not going to use any special tools, we're not going to disassemble the gun, but we're going to do essentially the bare bones to keep this lock up and running reliably in field conditions, whether we're in the middle of a fight, whether we're preparing to go into a fight, or if we're on a battlefield. Now, the first thing we're going to want to do is keep this lock as clean as possible. Even in a dry environment, black powder residue and fouling can inhibit spark production and can also inhibit or delay ignition. So we want to get as much of this powder residue off as possible, especially on a day like today that's very humid. It's probably going to rain in another hour or so. I might even be trimming off from filming because it's going to rain. I don't want to get my equipment wet. But what we're going to want to do is pull this hammer back to half cock, make sure that the frizzen is out of the way, and we're going to want to wipe away this black powder residue. And it is so stinking wet, it just wipes right out of there. So what we're going to do is just take the end of our handkerchief and wipe it all out of there. So you can see you can use your finger, you can use a handkerchief, really anything. So the areas that we're going to want to mainly focus on is obviously inside the pan, on the side of the barrel near the touch hole, underneath the frizzen cover, the face of the frizzen. That one's really important because if you get some fouling on that, it'll really inhibit sparks. And also 2 more places, the back side of the frizzen right there, kind of where the tail is, as well as underneath the flint. All of these areas are areas that will inhibit the function of the lock or inhibit spark production. So we want the lock to be as dry and free from fouling and residue as possible, particularly the pan and the underside of the pan cover. So let's go ahead and give it one more good wipe down to wipe all that nasty powder residue off. Oh, don't wipe your face with this. You'll get black powder residue all over your face, and especially if you get it in your eyes, it stings. Ask me how I know. So underneath the bottom of the flint, close the pan, behind right there, and we're just gonna give the lock a nice scrub down just for good measure. All right, that's much better. Looks pretty good. The next step in on the run maintenance is to prick the vent. So we're gonna get our vent pick right here. Oh, you can also use this to get into some of those corners, nooks and crannies to clean out some of those hard to reach areas on the lock as well. We're just gonna take this, stick it in there, rub it around, wipe some of that residue off that comes out with it, do it again. All right, now we've got a clear touch hole. Now, a clogged touch hole will completely prevent your gun from going off. So even if you have good sparks and a good ignition and the lock, a clogged vent hole will not allow the main charge to go off. So it's very important every few shots, if not every shot, to go ahead and prick out that touch hole. That way you can have reliable ignition every single time. Now the next step we're going to cover in this on-the-run flintlock maintenance is making sure that the flint is properly sharp. So there's two things we can do. We can completely replace the flint. If we have time, that's the best option. That way we have a fresh flint and it'll last us for who knows how many rounds. Or we can nap the flint. Now I've had flints that have lasted 25 rounds. I've had one flint lasted probably well over 100, and it just depends on the flint and to a certain degree the gun and the quality of the steel and the hardening on the steel on the frizzen. So keep in mind that having a fresh or a sharp flint is one of the primary keys to having your flintlock function reliably. If the frizzen cannot produce sparks, your gun will not work. So having a good quality flint and knowing when to replace it or when to nap the flint is of utmost importance if we're going to be shooting these guns as weapons. Be careful about having an expectation of these flints lasting relatively indefinitely. They need to be maintained, they need to be replaced rather routinely. It could be 25 rounds, it could be 15 rounds, it could be 100 rounds, but eventually they're going to need to be replaced or renapped. Let's first cover replacing the flint. What you're going to want to do is figure out what size of flint your gun likes best. Some manufacturers will state outright what size of flints your gun will take. A lot of the better kits will have that. If you get your gun from a really good quality gun maker, most likely he will supply you with a supply of flints or tell you exactly what size is going to be best. Let's go ahead and talk about replacing the flint. Now, I don't have a whole lot in my shooting pouch. I don't carry an enormous amount of gear in here. It's mostly just shot and wadding. But I do have a little turn screw here. So we're going to take our little brown best tool and pop this off, unscrew it, and there's our flint and the loose jaws. And we're going to set this aside because we can re-nap this very carefully. Hope I don't forget where I put that. All right, now that we have the old flint out, we can reach into our bag and pull out the new flint. Remember, we're going to need these this leather wrap to go around the flint. And we're just gonna, a little tricky to try and do on camera. Stick it right there in the jaws. All right, we're gonna close the pan. Now what we want is we want there to be about 1/8 of an inch between the face of the frizzen and the edge of the flint. So we've got that 1/8 of an inch right there. And we're also going to want to make sure that the flint is parallel with the face of the frizzen. Good. Let's check for sparks. And we have sparks. Yeah. Sparks so good, there's even a spark that stays in the pan for a second. All right. So that's replacing the flint. All right, let's go ahead and re-nap a flint. So this is an old flint that doesn't really spark anymore. We're going to want to bring it back to life. So what we're going to want to do is put it in the jaws upside down, so we're napping off of the top edge. Now some guns, some locks, are designed for the flint to already be upside down. So if that's the case, no need to flip the flint. Now you can use a special tool for this. I actually have a brass rod that I can use to nap the edge of this flint. I could also use the back side of my knife. Now the danger in using a knife or a steel implement is that obviously you're going to be striking steel against flint, which creates a spark. So if you are going to use a steel tool to nap the flint, make sure that your gun is either unloaded or you have something like a feather pushed down into the touch hole. That way there's no way that a spark can get into the main charge and ignite it. Because I have heard horror stories of rogue sparks, like a single spark, finding their way into the touch hole. So what we're going to want to do, flip this around here. It's a little bit easier to do the other way around. So I'm going to put my forefinger of my left hand underneath, supporting the edge of the flint. I've just got the butt end stuck up underneath my left shoulder, and I'm just gonna tap the edge. Now little flakes are gonna come off, and that's gonna start to sharpen the edge. Takes a little bit of practice to figure out where and how much pressure. Little flakes will come off. All right, that feels a lot sharper. Let's go ahead and flip it right side up and see how it works. Let's go ahead and test this flint out. Pour a little bit of powder in the pan. Not too much, mind you, and always remember to close your powder horn before you fire. So the last thing you want is a grenade going off on your side. That flint works. All right, it started to sprinkle, so I had to go and put my cow's knee on. Now this is a great accessory and a fun leather project to work on if you don't already have one. A cow's knee is a piece of leather that's been impregnated with wax or oil that provides a waterproof covering for your lock. Very important, as the lock is going to be very, very, very susceptible to moisture and rain. You get one drop of water in that pan, say goodbye to that charge in the pan, and you've got to dry it out, clean it out, and put another priming charge in there before you can hope to shoot again. So a cow's knee, very, very useful in a wet environment like it is today. Now, one more thing to mention is if you have a rifle, swabbing out the bore every few shots is going to be something that's probably going to be necessary to do to make sure that you can keep ramming the balls down the bore. So that would definitely be an additional technique that you could use for on-the-run flintlock maintenance, is swabbing out the bore of your rifle. I carry a smoothbore musket, so that's not really an issue for me. I've shot dozens and dozens of balls in one sitting without swabbing out the bore, and I use a relatively loose fitting ball compared to the bore size, and that's never been a problem for me with a smooth bore. With a rifle, you're obviously going to need to swab out between every so many shots, depending on your rifle and the load that you're using. Now, one more thing to keep in mind before we go today. So much of this routine maintenance we can do while we're walking, while we're running, while we're marching. We need to get to where this is reflexive and we do it automatically. After we shoot, if there's some time, if we're not under pressure, then we take our shirt tail, we take our rag, we wipe out the pan, we wipe out the underside of the frizzen, wipe underneath the flint. All of that needs to be reflexive, so we don't think about it. We just automatically perform the task. And if we do that, we're going to be able to focus more on shooting and enjoying reenacting and living history, and we won't have to worry about our guns getting bogged down with so many fouling issues. And additionally, if we're in the mindset of being an 18th century woodsman, soldier, militiaman, we need to be threat focused. We need to be on the lookout, and we need to be going through these routine maintenance steps so we can focus on the threat and focus on the immediate problem at hand and not worry about if our gun's going to go off. So following these basic flintlock on-the-run maintenance steps, they're going to help you be a better woods runner, a better militiaman, a better soldier, or just a better hunter or someone who enjoys shooting these old guns as a piece of history. And when you follow some of these basic maintenance steps, your shooting experience with these old guns will be far, far more enjoyable. Everyone, thank you so much for watching today. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, and especially on a day like today, keep your powder dry and your lock dry. And as always, we'll see you on down the trail in the next video, and have a great day. Thank you everyone so much. Now the next step we're going to cover in on-the-run flintlock maintenance is the flint. Maintaining a sharp,